And good evening, everyone, and welcome in to Tigers Tonight. I'm your host, John Maddox, joined by one half of the best co-host in all the land, just returning from the beautiful, beautiful confines of Birmingham, Alabama, is the one and only Larry Marley. Larry, how are you this evening, sir?
I'm great. Made it back into the house just in time for this. Just like a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was last week, I was coming back from Phoenix. This time I drove in, and yeah, Birmingham. And you and I were talking off air. How excited they are about their bowl. And I know we're going to talk about our bowl, but they've got Vanderbilt and Georgia Tech coming in, which are two fan bases real close to Birmingham. They're really excited. And I think the teams are excited to be there. So I know we're going to talk about that, but those are two teams. And if you are itching for a bowl, the 27th, I believe, is the date of that game. Yeah, I would probably tune in for that game because I think that's going to be a really good game.
I do too. I think that's going to be one of the better bowl games. And we hope to have somebody from West Virginia Rivals joining us here tonight to talk about what they're going to look like for their bowl game. But they are, as many other schools are, and as Larry notes on there, they are drunk from the coaching carousel right now as they close in on their next head coach, which is allegedly going to be Pete Thamel reported Rich Rodriguez. And earlier this afternoon, it finally broke that Bill Belichick is. I didn't have that on my bingo card, but Bill Belichick is going to be the coach at North Carolina, which is just insane. You know, I texted you guys when I heard that, and I was like, you could have asked me 1,000 places that dude would have gone. Never would have guessed. But anyway, so Memphis is not embroiled in a coaching search, and I am not a Tulane quarterback. Therefore, I'm not in the transfer portal. So life is pretty good. Before we get into the bowl game, I do want to bring up sort of a Twitter uprising yesterday. Apparently at the coaches show, Coach Silverfield had a not so kind remark to say about our friends from New Orleans. Something I don't want to misquote, but something I don't care if they lose every game from here on out. So I'm wondering, again, trying to see if we can get somebody from West Virginia here, but I'm wondering, that almost sounds like something happened somewhere along the way. Because for those who don't know, that is really out of character for Coach Silverfield, like very much so. I posted earlier today
even off the record.
Off the record. Yes, 100%. I posted something today about how, and this is true, and I'll die on this hill, he runs Memphis because somebody made the comment about, well, Bill Belichick's going to run North Carolina like an NFL program. And anybody who spent any time around the Memphis program, players, media, whatever, will tell you Ryan Silverfield runs Memphis very much like a pro organization. And so that's why that remark kind of took me off guard a little bit, because he is always very guarded and very careful. Now, maybe he thought, hey, it's my last coach's show of the year. Nobody's going to pay attention. I did go back and listen to it. Some people said, well, maybe it was out of context. No, it wasn't really out of context.
And it wasn't tongue-in-cheek either.
No, it was. So I just wonder with stuff like that, did something happen, or was he trying to be funny in his own unique way? But it almost came across like something happened somewhere, either at the game or with the player, or, I know nobody tampers in the portal. That never happens. But I can't help but wonder if something happened. But anyway, I just thought that was very interesting and not, but I will say, and I think I've said this privately, there has in the past been a change with him as we come out of the season and get ready for bowl games. He's just more relaxed, more casual. I think he even had his shirt untucked one time last year, a couple of years ago, which is, again, very unusual for him. But he's kind of like he is at the beginning of the season, where he's a little more fun-loving, a little more off the cuff. But that was very out of character for him. So before we get into the bowl game itself, I think we need to address a couple things. Number one, why Frisco? And I thought that the article in the Daily Memphian kind of laid it all out pretty well. I will tell you from my perspective what it looks like, and this could be totally wrong, and somebody will call me out if it is, but it looks like the SEC kind of said, we're not playing Memphis in a bowl game. because you had Tulane going to the Gasparilla Bowl. There was talk of Birmingham, and I know Vanderbilt and Memphis won't play. That is
A
just
non-starter.
yeah, it's a non-starter, and I'd have to ask somebody more experienced than I am why that is, but there is just no it was a huge shock when they played in basketball. Everybody was stunned that they agreed to play. But I think Memphis played them back in the 70s, and
Oh no, we played them all the way through the 80s.
And it didn't end well, I'm assuming.
Right. I mean, for the most part, Memphis was, and even back then, was the better program. And you would see it. So Vanderbilt was trying, the SEC was trying to build, and as the SEC expanded, which wasn't until the early 90s, that's when you really started to see Vandy, because they played us in basketball all the way through the early 90s, and then they started running from us. And they just wouldn't touch us after that. And Eddie Fogler, who was the coach at Vanderbilt, was the one who sort of said, I don't, this isn't good for us.
Yeah, it doesn't.
And they started backing off. So there's a name drop, Eddie Fogler. It's a name drop.
Gene Cady not available for you, or MK Turk not available?
Did you know MK down in Hattiesburg?
And totally off topic. Did you know that Joy Lee McNellis is still the coach at Southern Miss for the women?
I did, and for those who don't know, she's been battling cancer off and on for the last 10 years. She's 67.
Yeah, something like
that. She's in her 60s. Maybe in her 70s. I don't, but I think she's 67. I saw. But anyway, yes, and she's still the coach. She's a former coach at Memphis. She was a Southern Miss grad, and she's been there for a long time, right? 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years. Yeah, I think she leave here in 2004.
It was early 2000s.
Yeah. So, but anyway, that was just totally off topic. But so before we get into the bowl game, I want to talk a little bit about bowl games and kind of how we got derailed there. But, the Memphis staff is always been one, and this was true when Mike was here, Justin, they always prefer pre-Christmas warm weather. That's kind of the preference, or really good P5 opponent. Didn't always work out, but there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one is pre-Christmas is great because the kids get to go home, and you're not holding, because you only get, 15 practices these days. So you're not just having kids sitting around, and, the warm weather is obvious. You want to, reward a team for going 10-2. I will say that Hawaii reached out, and we were like, absolutely. The league was like, absolutely not. We're never doing that again. But I think it really came down to Fenway, Gasparilla, and Frisco, and frankly, the school passed on Fenway, and I get that. I don't know the payout of Fenway; they don't publish it, but it was going to be prohibitively expensive, as I understand it, for Memphis to go to Boston, and frankly, play a middling team anyway. I mean, although no disrespect to our friends from Morgantown, are kind of playing a middle of the road team that literally just fired their coach, but you're going to be playing a 7-5, 6-6 team at best. Although they got burned with UConn. So it's going to be UConn and UNC, which oddly enough, that would be really funny if they do hire Belichick and he somehow found this way on the sidelines.
I mean, it's a done deal.
He won't, but that's going to be wild because, the cameras are going to be all over him. His first game back as a college coach will be at Fenway Park. So that's kind of what, and then, if you're comparing Gasparilla to Frisco, there's a lot of positives for Frisco in that, it's 35 minutes from Seth Hennigan's home. It is an easy 6.5, 7-hour drive. It's a reasonably priced bowl game. The payout is not great, but it is what it is. It's not as expensive to take a team down there. Even though it's a soccer stadium, it's a relatively new place. Lots to see and do in Frisco. It's a really, really nice part of town, just north of Dallas. Really nice area. It's up north, I think, of where SMU is there in University Park. I think it's up a little further than that. But, a lot of positives. It's an early game. And one thing I think, Larry, that coaches probably like about that is a continuity, of practice, right? Where you don't have to, if you're not playing until the 27th and your last game was November 29th, you don't have to take like a week off. You can just say, hey, we're going to practice Monday, Wednesday, Friday, boom, and be done. And keep the kids, and then you have that continuity, which is really important.
Yeah, and I never got to experience postseason football, so I wish I had. But I will say, there was one year where we thought we were going to get in, or we thought we had a really good chance, and we were going to have to practice over Thanksgiving, and for the kids, so this goes back to wanting to get them, get this done and get them out into Christmas and the holidays. And it's always preferable to not have to come back and try to mentally get yourself back into football, because, these kids are not robots. I mean, and what this will allow them to do, they're gonna have exams. I think they have exams this week. I could be wrong, but I think they have exams this week. And then they're probably, a lot of them are probably done with exams as of tomorrow, because usually the way it was when I was in college, and I know it is right now with my daughter, you do exams Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday and Friday are for your makeups if you can't make one of the exams for the other days. So most people, will be done by tomorrow at the latest. And now you can just focus in on football for the next, week, and focus in on West Virginia. And John, to your point, I mean, they don't have to practice and then stop for Christmas and then practice some more. Which this is a side note, but I think that's going to make the first round of the playoffs so good, because you're really going to see the kids that are playing, and particularly I think that Tennessee-Ohio State game. Those kids will have been playing all the way through, and they will just continue to practice right up until the first week of the playoffs. It's going to be, I'm just telling you, that's going to be an awesome weekend of football. And Memphis plays that Wednesday leading up to that weekend. Tuesday leading up to that weekend, right? So
technically,
Tuesday, then you have bowls Wednesday, NFL probably Thursday, bowl Friday, and then
the first bowl games I think are actually this weekend. Celebration Bowl, and then the IS4S salute to, I don't know what it's called.
Whatever.
It's supposed to be this weekend. So you'll have kind of bowl season kicking off a little early here. So, so that one of the things about bowl games too is motivation, right? Like, how much give a damn is West Virginia going to have, or is Memphis going to have? And, or not just those two schools, but any of these schools, insert Alabama. How much give a damn are they going to have in the Reliant West Bowl against Michigan? They feel shafted. They feel left out of the playoffs. That's going to go one of two ways. It's either going to motivate them like it did Memphis at Tulane, or they're going to say, screw it, we're not going to do this. And so I always wonder about that. And this is a general thing, but I always wonder about motivation. And that might be one of the other advantages to having kids stay and getting your bowl game done early. Much easier to keep them motivated for 2 weeks than it is for 4 weeks, and to keep them engaged in the process. And your opt-outs are going to be your opt-outs. Memphis hasn't had a ton. West Virginia's had a few, nothing like Marshall. Good Lord. And that's a whole nother situation in West Virginia. But so you kind of know where you stand, and you can adjust kind of on the fly. And it feels to me more like a regular season, but I do think that motivation is much easier to get these two teams rallied around, and not just this game, but the whole kind of first week, than it is to say, all right, well, you guys are playing like that First Responders Bowl. I forget who it is. I think it's like North Texas and Texas State. It's like January 3rd. Like, it's like, how do you keep kids engaged in the process. And but I do wonder if you're on a lame duck team, although you'll know who your new coach is, and I guess there is some thought of I'm auditioning for my next coach. But
We
yeah,
didn't see that. Well, we did not see that when Norvell was waiting and we went to Birmingham, right? We didn't see that at all. So I don't know about that. I think to your point, to me, and I've said this, I think Memphis has a lot of motivation because they want A, to win 11 games, B, to beat a power conference school, and I think lastly to send Seth out at his home.
and that sounds like a segue. And so now we bring in from WVU Sports, Wesley Shoemaker. Wesley, how are you this evening, sir?
I'm well. It's certainly a time around Morgantown, that's for sure.
You've got nothing going on up there. It's all quiet and laid back. The last 3-4 weeks have just been, chill. You guys haven't had anything to talk about. So before we get into the nuts and bolts of West Virginia, so I don't know that I've ever seen a fan base turn on a coach quite like they turned on Neil Brown, especially a guy who was moderately successful. He wasn't great shakes. But so what is the mood with the talk of Rich Rod coming back, and, what's kind of the expectations around what he can do?
Well, it's very new news, as you guys know, happened within the last couple of hours, but there is a serious divide, I would say. There's a large contingent of Mountaineer fans that are very pro Rich Rod, that are very for, let's run this back. This was the West Virginia glory days. This was an era where West Virginia was having its highest levels of national success. And then there's some people that don't really want to forgive him for what he did and the way he exited and the things that have come after the exit. And so there's a lot of uncertainty, I think, still around this whole situation. It still hasn't been officially announced, although all the major outlets as well as our site has kind of keyed in on Rich Rod's going to be the next coach. It's just a matter of when the papers get signed. But there is certainly a clear divide, I would say, between a lot of fans, and I think you'll certainly see that. But as I think many will agree, is winning cures a lot.
Winning makes for short memories. So let's kind of get into this bowl game. This is the first matchup, obviously, between Memphis and West Virginia. West Virginia, actually no stranger to the Liberty Bowl. They've played here a couple times. But just kind of give us an overall, what does West Virginia like to do offensively and then maybe defensively as well?
Yeah, so offensively, they want to run the ball no matter what. That's what they want to do. I don't care if Neil Brown's not here. They're still going to try and run the ball like crazy. Two really good running backs, C.J. Donaldson, Jaheim White. They've played really well this year, especially as of late. C.J. Donaldson has really come along. And also, they've lost their top wide receiver, Traylon Ray, who had a pretty gruesome season-ending leg injury there late. And so they've been using those running backs more and more, especially in the pass game, too, the last couple of weeks towards the end of the season. And then Garrett Green at quarterback, he's a true dual threat. He can run all over the place, and he can also throw it. They want to either throw it deep or just run, and that's what they want to do. That was their success on offense last year. And they tried to kind of dink and dunk a little bit on offense this year in the pass game, but they just really haven't been successful with that. Garrett's health was spotty, to say the least. He got hurt for a good bit there. And then on defense, they want to get after you up front. The secondary is not great. The defensive line has been arguably the best position group on this West Virginia team this year. And so TJ Jackson, he's a guy up front who was a first-team all-league player. And so they just want to get after the quarterback and try and cause havoc up front because the back end has really struggled in the secondary.
So as a former safety, I can tell you if your safety is the leading tackler on your team, that probably is a bad sign. Okay. Yep. Memphis likes to run the football. Tell me how or what is West Virginia going to do to stop our running game?
Yeah, so West Virginia has actually played pretty well against the run at times, I would say, this year. If you look back to games like against Pitt, they really shut the run down. I know that was real early in the season, but I mean, against RJ Harvey at UCF, they kind of slowed him down too, a team that also really wants to run the ball. But then a team like Texas Tech with their pace, how quick they went, they ran all over the Mountaineers. So it's kind of been hit or miss with the run game, but I think they really just want to get – they're really physical on the defensive line. I mean, they've got a lot of experience up there. Sean Martin's a name who's been at Morgantown at West Virginia forever, it feels like. And then TJ Jackson, he's a transfer from Troy. I keep going back to him just because he's really produced this year. I think he has 13 or more TFLs, almost 7 sacks this year. So he's really produced. And if they can kind of play together as a unit, they'll be fine stopping the run. What's gotten them in trouble at times is one guy tries to make a play here, and then it turns into a problem on the back end. But also it's important to note that Josiah Trotter, who I think was their second leading tackler this year and led all true freshmen in tackles in the country, he has entered the transfer portal, so he will not be playing. And while he struggled against the pass, he was really good and physical in the run game.
So as a team that I haven't dove into it too much, but I'm sure you're going to have probably a couple more guys hit the portal. Obviously with the coaching changes, well, I mean, it happens to everybody, but who are some maybe, or have there been other key guys that are either leaning towards the portal or have hit the portal or just aren't going to play?
Yeah, there hasn't been. It's been a pretty big surprise. I mean, the first surprise came for West Virginia on signing day when they inked almost all of their class, about 20 recruits. And the staff that has remained in place has been very, very active, and they've been very good with the players. And I know Neil Brown had a level of involvement there with the recruiting side of things, but they've been really good with kind of keeping guys in-house. I don't think there's really any key contributors off the top of my head that I can think that won't be playing besides Josiah Trotter. There have been a couple portal entries, but they're more depth guys on like second stringers and third stringers, but there's not a starter that really I don't think is playing. The only one that might not play as much, and this came out today in their press conference, is left tackle Wyatt Milam. He's an all-pro, Big 12 offensive lineman of the year. He's going to go first or second round most likely in April, and so he's going to play. How much to be determined. They kind of want to be cautious with him, but still allow him to play.
Well, first, real quick question. Is Josiah Trotter any relation to Jeremiah Trotter?
Yes, they are related. Yep.
Yeah, okay. For those who don't know, Jeremiah Trotter was an NFL player. Okay, so we talked about...
And his dad was probably even better.
Right.
Yeah. And then his brother played at Clemson, is now on the Eagles as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we talked earlier about, and John's, I'm going to quote him exactly, the give a damn, which, we've been to a lot of bowls. I know you guys have been to a lot of bowls. A lot of times, we saw this last year when Memphis played Iowa State here, and by, midway through the second quarter, you could tell Iowa State wanted to be 100 million other places than the Liberty Bowl, right? What do you think the give a damn, for lack of a better term, is going to be for West Virginia? Do you think the coaching situation is going to affect that? And do you think that how are they going to find motivation for these guys?
The motivation's simple. It's the last game for most of them, especially on the offensive side of the ball. It's Garrett Green's last game, 3 starters on the offensive line. It's their last game. And that's the true leaders of this team. The leaders of this team start at quarterback with Garrett Green. And the first thing he said after the Texas Tech game when he was asked, like, do you care about a bowl game? He's like, I want one more shot with my guys. And so that's where it comes from. That's where the motivation's been really all November when they've kind of been out of the Big 12 race. I mean, mathematically, yes, they were in it, but truthfully, were they in it? Probably not. And so I also think the guys rally around Chad Scott, who's going to be the interim head coach. He's the running backs coach. He brings a lot of juice. He's a very high energy, get in your face kind of guy. He's younger, and I think that kind of plays to some of these guys, but truthfully it's the seniors on this team, is that it's their last game for a lot of them, and so they'll come to play.
So talk about Larry's favorite topic, special teams, strong field goal unit. So tell us a little bit about the kicking game.
Yeah, so Michael Hayes has not been used a ton this year. He made one from 50 plus against Texas Tech. Other than that, West Virginia loves to go for it on fourth down. The kicking game that has been a much better, how to put it, like the kickoff game was a problem the last couple of years for West Virginia. I think last year Baylor returned 2, Houston returned 1. Like, it was seriously a problem. They've gotten much better on kickoff, and they've also started to return punts at a much higher rate. Preston Fox has been really good at punt return. He's been doing this thing for 2-3 years now, so he's really getting comfortable, and he's seeing the field just much better. And so punt return they've been great at, and kickoff coverage they've been great at. Field goals, it's kind of hit or miss just because they don't kick a ton.
Yeah, I noticed they've just kicked 13 all year. And to your point about fourth down, holy cow, 23 out of 37 on the season, leads the Big 12 by Baylor's next at 31. Is that a mentality thing? Was that a Neil Brown mentality thing, just a riverboat gambler, or was that more kind of necessity with, maybe a shaky kicking game in the past?
I believe it was a Neil Brown thing, plain and simple. It's just they trust their offense. Neil's an offensive guy. He always wants his offense to stay on the field. And truthfully, there was a lot of times that they would kind of be in that 30-yard line, opposing 30 to 50-yard line, and it would still be like 4th and 8, and they'd still go for it just because they're so in between there. I think kicking in college is so hit or miss, especially with punters. Like some punters,
you could have just stopped with kicking.
Yeah, exactly. So they want to go for it. They trust their offense. Neil's an offensive guy. I think that sums it up enough.
So what do you think? So I do want to talk about Neil Brown and how this went down. What do you think turned the fans against Neil specifically this year? Because like John said, he hasn't been terrible. They haven't been, extremely successful. But, I can go back and look at their schedule, and I'm looking at it right now. I mean, other than the Pitt loss, which I watched that game, they shouldn't have lost that game. But and maybe Baylor. But other than that, there's not a bad team that they lost to. What do you think the fans finally? What do you think the breaking point was?
There's two parts to this. The first part is the preseason expectations that not us put on them, it's that themselves put on them. This whole summer, they were talking about this team's going to get to Arlington and play for a Big 12 championship. They said, we're experienced. We won 9 games last year. This is the year West Virginia gets it done. You come out of the gate, lose against Penn State. That's fine. Not many people would expect you to win that game. Yes, there was a lot of hype then, but then that Pitt loss really started to change things. You're up 10 with 5 to go and you lose that game and they score a touchdown at the 40-yard line on like a 2nd and 30. That just simply can't happen. But then you start Big 12 play 2-0 and everyone's like, okay, we're cool to put this Pitt loss behind you. And you have back-to-back night games at home against ranked teams in Iowa State and Kansas State. And against Iowa State, you have a hot start, you miss a kick, and then it's downhill from there. And then against Kansas State, you just get big boyed. And so after that, there was a clear kind of fracture with him and the fan base, and he worked really hard to try and get that back. But there were obviously the comments, the having fun comments that just seemed to make that divide more and more just harsh. And so there was never really a comfort level between him and the fan base entering, I would say, mid-October to November, just because of how things went. And truthfully, he had to win the big game, and he couldn't do that. He was, I believe, 3-17 against ranked teams. He lost 10 straight to ranked teams, and I think all of them were by double digits. And so that's not how you stay at a program like West Virginia. West Virginia is a top 20, 25 all-time win program. Fans know that. It's a prideful place, and he just couldn't get the big wins when it mattered the most.
So moving up the chain a little bit, along those same lines, of course, Memphis, very familiar with your current athletic director, Ben Baker, who was here for quite some time. What's kind of because I only see Twitter, right? So I don't get into X. I only see X these days. So I don't know the kind of the feel, but like I've noticed some acrimony towards him as well. So what's kind of just the overall feel of the athletic department in general?
I would say it's been if you were looking at it in the last week, that's an unfair place to judge them based off of the situation that is currently going on and finding a new head football coach. Prior to the last month, I would say it's been pretty positive. He's had to deal with a lot early. He had to hire a new basketball coach, and not only do that, he had to replace a living legend in Bob Huggins. He had to hire the third women's basketball coach in 3 years, and he had to do that when she just completely bolted for a job at Minnesota after just 1 year in Morgantown. He had to replace a living legend at the baseball program and had to do so in-house. So there's been a lot of decisions on his plate as far as coaching hires, and that doesn't even then begin to enter the discussion of now you're competing in a bigger Big 12. Now you're competing in a rev share environment that's coming down the road, right? And so there's a lot of factors that people seem to think that it's one easy fix for Wren, and it's not. There were a lot of pre-existing problems, especially with the financial side, because it's hard to raise money at West Virginia and compete with some of these higher schools in the Big 12. People think that will change with this Rich Rod hire. They think that some money will certainly be coming in, but it's not. It's easier said than done for West Virginia. So I think that ask that question again about next October, and you'll really get a sense based off of how the season starts. But I mean, even with the basketball team, they have been off to a great start here. They beat Gonzaga, and so there's been a lot of credit sent his way for the coaching hires he's made, at least.
Yeah, I think I read 5 and 17 months or something crazy like that. It's just, I can't imagine. Larry, do you have anything else?
No.
So before we let you go, first of all, thanks, because I know you guys are slammed right now. Thanks for taking some time. But so tell us how you see next Tuesday shaking out, and maybe give us a final score.
Yeah, so I'll be lying to you if I'll tell you I've been full on Memphis prep just with everything we've had going on. But I just think that it'll be a struggle for West Virginia to stop this offense. I know the Memphis quarterback, he can really throw the ball. I know that offense can really get going, and West Virginia has struggled to stop teams. And so while I think West Virginia will be able to score offensively, will it be enough? I'm not sure, just based off how the defense played the last month. But if I had to give a score right now, 6 days out, I would probably lean Memphis, something like 34, 28, 27 ballpark in there. But I think it'll be close, but I think a lot of points will be scored.
Hey, Wes, tell people how they can keep up with you this week coming up and where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at Wesley Shue. And so we'll have a new football coach in the morning. So if that interests anyone, be sure to find all of our information there.
Hey, Wes, thanks for you and Keenan for kind of running the ship here and jumping on with us, and best of luck to the Mountaineers.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Take care.
Thanks. All right, Wesley Shoemaker from WVU Sports, the West Virginia rival site. So one thing he said, and I haven't had a chance to kind of get into ball prep mode here yet either, but running quarterback.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
He's the second leading rusher on their team.
Averages right at 5.5 yards a carry. He's rushed for almost 700 yards this year. That has historically, being frank, been a concern.
Yep. We saw Horvath, what he did to us.
Well, I think he's different. I think
I understand, but what I'm saying
is, yeah, and I think that makes it worse in some ways.
Right.
Because, his arm can hurt you too. The bowl games, man, they're so damn hard because you don't know who's in this day and age. You don't know who's going to play. You don't know, again, back to our give a damn, you don't know motivation. I do think in this case, you have two motivated teams. I think you have two teams that want to perform well for two entirely different reasons. But, I don't know. I don't, again, I haven't dug into West Virginia, so I don't really know.
I mean, if you look at their stats, I mean, I watched the Pitt game. I think that maybe that and the Kansas State game were probably the two that I watched. Their defense is really suspect. And of course, I say this, and they're going to play the best game of the year. But the back end of their defense is really suspect. And if we can block up front, which I know is an issue, but if you can block, if we can keep Seth upright, I'm telling you, John, he's going to complete passes. The question's going to be, can we run the football? And, if you can, can we get DeRosier in space? Can we get Rock in space? If you do that, these guys we can score on these guys. But again, the question is going to be, can we block up front? Because this game's going to be one in the trenches.
I think the DeRosier comment is he's my X factor, because he is the guy. I love Mario Anderson, love what he brings to the table. I love what Brandon Thomas brings to the table. But like Jeb just said, spread them out, work the middle of the field, get DeRosier the ball where he can do something with it. Like I really noticed that on the couple big plays he had, is he got the ball in a position where he could just turn and go. He didn't have to reach behind him. There was no reaching up high. It was just catch the ball, go, take the pitch, go. There was not a lot of, he didn't have to do a lot of work. And I think to get the play started, and I think that is the key for me, because he's a guy that's really, really difficult to defend, because what do? Do you take a corner and shift over on him, and now you're uncovering either Blankumsey, Rock, or Colby Drake, or you're moving a safety over to one of them, and you can't cover him with a linebacker. So how do you, I think he gets a lot more touches this game. I think that this is a game where he can sort of introduce himself again. I said it, that he introduced himself to the country in that Tulane game. And I think this is another one, Larry, where he can really come out and kind of establish a Memphis offensive presence. I really think, too, what you're going to see is they're going to go watch this West Virginia tape, and just what Wes said. They're going to go watch that Texas Tech just play after play after play. I got to go look, but I think it was like something like 86 plays or something ridiculous like that. And they blew West Virginia out by 37 points. So I think you're going to maybe see a little more tempo, which, if Memphis does that, it will be like the first time this year. But I think you're going to see more tempo. And I think getting the ball out of to me, with them being so physical up front, the key is going to be getting the ball out of Seth's hands quickly. Slants, screens, digs, like any of that stuff that doesn't take 10 seconds to develop, squares, angles, any of that stuff that can happen quickly, seam routes. I think any of that, the middle of the field is going to be important. And I don't know.
Well, getting Blankumsey over the top, John. We need to take the cover off the defense too.
I think if you do that early, that helps the running game.
It does, absolutely. We saw that last year against Iowa State, where we were able to get over the top on them. So that's another important factor. But to me, and again, I've seen this. I haven't sat down and done a deep dive on West Virginia, but like I said earlier when Wes was on, when your safety's the number one tackler on your team, that's a really bad sign, because that means that you're getting a lot of penetration to the second and third level of the defense, and a lot of it, because the safety should never be the leading tackler on your team. And I'm just telling you, like, it should never happen. So when I saw that, I went, wow. Like, what happens in order for that to happen, you've got linemen that are blocking and then getting downfield and making blocks against linebackers. And if you can get that, if we can start getting to the second level, man, I'm telling you, we've got running backs that can absolutely break this game. I'm just, John, we talk about it's tough to get, to determine what is going to happen in a bowl. But I'm telling you, I think you said it right earlier off the air. I think Memphis is looking like this. This is their playoff. We're going to show everybody.
Let's get into the predictions then here for you and I. It will be 11:37 p.m. next Tuesday night. Jesus, game doesn't start till 8. Be exhausted. They will look up at the Toyota Stadium scoreboard in Frisco, and it will say
38-28 Memphis. I think Memphis gets off early and gets a lead. I think you're going to see West Virginia come back. They've got some weapons, but ultimately Memphis is going to outscore them. And I think you're just going to see us be able to move the ball.
I said 31-27 earlier this week. So it feels like that kind of game. It could be 40. I think that if Memphis, I think the only team that's going to blow the other team out is Memphis. I don't foresee West Virginia being able to blow Memphis out. Again, I've not watched I think I watched a couple minutes of the Pitt game. I'm really impressed with Garrett Green. I think he's a hell of a player. the fact that he can run the ball is a little scary to me, because that's just something Memphis has struggled with when the play breaks down and contain gets broken. Memphis is going to have to stay in their lanes, and Memphis is going to have gap integrity, and Memphis is going to have to do the things they've struggled with. And this is not a Ryan Silverfield thing. This goes back through Mike's tenure. Memphis has just always seemed to struggle with guys that can do things when the original play breaks down. They'll get good pressure, not get there, and then something happens. One thing I think is a big key to this game too is West Virginia was last in the Big 12 in third down conversions on defense. They gave up almost 50%. And Memphis, I think, is second in the AAC in staying on the field. So that to me is another key factor. So I think we're in agreement there. I don't want to spend a ton of time, but I do want to talk about some other issues around college football, mainly around the playoff. I wrote a piece a few days ago about the future of college football and kind of how I see it shaping out. And I think, oddly enough, you're starting already to see those wheels turning. What I think is eventually going to happen, and I said this, is you're going to have a top tier breakaway come out of the NCAA and do their own thing. And then the rest of us will kind of get to play. And I went into a lot of detail. Go check it out on the site if you're interested. It's free. It's not behind a paywall. Working on a couple other pieces. We're going to get some athletes' perspective on that, and some coaches and AD staff, and then we're going to get media perspective as well. Kind of tide us over through the summer. But we knew it was coming Sunday when Alabama didn't make the playoff. I think I texted you guys. I was like, "Oh, this shall not stand. This affront will not stand."
Right.
And what they're already talking about is maybe going to 14, and they said that the SEC is going to get 4 and the Big Ten is going to get 4. No. The SEC is going to get 5. I think they'll go to 16s. I think the SEC will take 5. The Big Ten will take 5. And then everybody else will fight for 6. So,
well, you got the Big 12 is gonna bitch. But
I think they'll get 1 or 2. The ACC will get 1 or 2, and then you'll have everybody else. Yeah.
But here's the way I think it's going to happen, and I've said this for a long time. Ultimately, it's going to be a pay to play. You have to have a certain payroll in order to participate, and what that number. Whatever that number is, and you have to guarantee that you will have a payroll between X and X. And that's how, and I've been saying this, and because John, you and I've talked about it, I've been saying this for a long time, that that's where this is headed, is that you're going to have, it's not that different from the Premier League in soccer, okay? You have to have a payroll of X to X. And if you can't do that, you cannot participate. And I think there's going to be a lot of surprise on the teams that do participate and the teams that don't. I'm telling you.
Well, I shared this week, I think I shared it on X, the CPA put together because the House settlement is coming down. And basically what that's going to do is that's going to say, all right, 105 scholarships. Schools have to contribute so much to rev share. And right now, if you put that number at 22%, which is kind of what the going rate is, but here's your comparison. So at 20, Memphis will be the highest revenue generating team in the AAC, right around 26 million, somewhere through that ballpark. And Vance, you're right. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. Schools like Mississippi State. So their contribution is going to be around 5.6, which I think somehow ends up being, second. I don't know. I didn't dig deep into the numbers. I'm saving that kind of for summertime and once the House settlement gets settled, because I'm really interested in that. But so Memphis is going to be 5.5 million, somewhere through that ballpark. You can contribute a maximum of 20.5 million,
right?
Which leads to your point. Ohio State generated $127 million in revenue. That's their estimate. So they are going to be able to cap out at 20.5 million. So you're going to have Memphis at $5.5 million. Ohio State, and I'm just using them for example because they were on top at 20 point, and there will be a group of 16, 18 schools at that level at $20.5 million. You just can't, you can't work in that world because what I told somebody today, I said, my best comparison to this is we're going to go back to the old non-scholarship limit days. Like everybody's like, well, how did Bear Bryant win so many games? He had 175 kids on the team. That's how he
Right.
gave 175 scholarships. That's how he won. And he was a great coach, but it helps when you've got 5 teams.
Right.
But you've got schools like Mississippi State that, despite all that SEC TV revenue, what was it? I think somebody said that was at the SBJ Sports Business Conference today. 16 schools generate 80% of the television revenue. Like, that's staggering. So you're going to take basically the top half of the SEC and the top half of the big, whatever they are, 10, and they're in a league of their own. Like Memphis will not be able to compete financially or otherwise with Alabama. Not that we're trying to right now, but that's why I think that the break has to be inevitable, right? Because you can't ask Memphis to say, hey, take your $5.5 million and go to Tuscaloosa. Now, here's the other side of that. What was the first response? And it was dumb, but the first response out of Alabama's mouth, why would we schedule tough games? Where's the motivation if we're being punished, although you lost 3 conference games?
Well, and don't lose to Vanderbilt.
Yeah,
that's my response.
Well, I'll give you Vanderbilt. Don't lose to Oklahoma by 21 points the last 2 weeks of the season.
Look, here's the thing. A lot of good teams have gone to Norman and lost. Okay, that doesn't. But there's no excuse. You're freaking Alabama. You do not go to Nashville and lose. And they didn't just lose. They got their ass kicked. And I'm sorry, you're freaking Alabama. You don't lose that game. There's no shame in losing. The other games that they lost, because I mean, look, it happens. Okay. But I'm sorry, you just can't lose that game. And if they don't lose to Vanderbilt, they're in right now, and we ain't got to talk about this crap.
So but I think that leads to what I was about to say. What would Alabama's motivation be to schedule Memphis? Zero. There's no motivation.
And
so
they're never going to come here.
What they're going to do is, and I went into all the detail in this thing, but I think what you're going to see, and you heard Herb Street and Saban start down the road, and I'm like, did you guys read what I wrote? I mean, it was that whole thing, centralized scheduling, 10 conference games. I basically said, well, it's going to be 10 games. I broke it down into A, B, and C. You're going to have the A tier, which is, I called it the Super League or the Elite League or something like that. And they're going to schedule 10 games amongst those. Then I think the only fly in the ointment here is antitrust. But I think the way they get around that is they'll say, we'll schedule 10 games there. We will meet the outcry of scheduling North Alabama, and or Mercer,
right.
When they played this year. So you will actually have to schedule 2 teams from Tier B, which is where schools like Memphis will be. I hate telling this, Kansas, Tulane, those schools will be, and then you're not allowed to schedule Tier C. So I think that centralized,
but we could, because we're B, so we could schedule C, right?
Right, you could schedule no more than 2 games against C. So you've got 10 games in amongst yourself, and 2 games one level below, and in Alabama's case, or the top level, you can't drop 2 levels down.
So you're thinking like 16 in A and 50 in B.
Well, no, I think you'll have more in A. I think you'll end up 30-ish, because you can't. The scheduling would dictate that you're going to have more than 16, but I don't think home and homes are out of the question. I don't think that kind of stuff is off the radar. I think that's
right. No, I'm with you.
Play, but I think that you are going to have a final. I say final. Nothing's ever final in college football, but you're going to have kind of a finality of a separation of powers, so to speak. You're going to have a group here, and a group here, and we're going to stop pretending. Which, look, I'm all in favor of. I know some people don't like the optics of it, but fine. Let's have a group of 5 playoff, because it's clear that you're never going to be given a chance at that highest level. I'm stunned that Boise State got the 3 seed. I don't think they had any way around it. I think they had to. But I think the other thing that's going to change with the current playoff is the guarantee for a bye to be a conference champion. That's done. Like, I think this year it was one and done. That's never happening again. And I think you're going to have a reorganization of that. And what the kind of that mid-tier group need to realize is, you know what? Screw it. We're not going to play you either. Like, because it doesn't do us any good to go get
Right, to go get our ass kicked.
and physically.
Here's the only thing I would add to that. I think that there should be a way, and I don't know what that mechanism looks like, for a team to move up and for teams to move down.
Relegation won't work.
Right, relegation and promotion.
I don't think it'll work. I don't think relegation will work because, I mean, can you imagine? I mean, although I guess it motivates you, although I can't imagine how it would motivate you to fire coaches any faster than they're getting fired. But you go, if you're Florida State and you end up at the bottom of the bottom of whatever this league is, and you get sent down, like, their fans are not going to stand. There's too much money at stake, I think, here. Although, I mean, there's a shit ton of money in the Premier League. I mean, but
yeah, I mean, but here's the thing. Like here's the thing. Like, I'm an Arsenal fan. Everybody knows that. Arsenal's never going to be relegated because they're always going to win enough games. And John, what you're talking about is, and yeah, Florida State had a terrible year this year, but that's never going to happen again. They're never going to be that bad. Not for 2 years in a row. And that's probably what you'd be looking at. But it's an interesting topic, but you're right. That's exactly where we're headed. It's a pay to play, which you and I are saying the same thing, more or less.
It's just going to be how the governance. I think the first thing is,
but State and Ole Miss, and they're not going to want to hear this. But Mississippi State and Ole Miss are going to be right there with Memphis.
I don't think Ole Miss will, because I think
they'll be above. No way.
Yeah. Oh, I don't think people understand how much money.
Oh, I know.
Is in Oxford, and
I know.
No, I don't think
know that it's generating. But maybe I'm wrong. But the schools like Arkansas, Mississippi State. I mean, there's going to be some surprises. There's going to be some surprising schools that go, and surprising schools that don't.
I just think that
Kansas State are in big trouble. Iowa State, big trouble.
Well, we've kind of said that from the beginning. And I think, as we wrap up here, I think that was one of the things that woke Memphis up about football was when the first whole shakeup kind of started to go down, and Kansas was going to be left without a conference despite being they
had just won the championship in football or basketball.
The blue blood. I mean, Kentucky and Kansas, North Carolina, and Duke are kind of up here, and then everybody else. Right. They were going to be left out in the cold, and I think that.
I know that. That's what did it. That was a
wake-up call to look at that.
Football will affect you, and once they realized that bad football will affect basketball, you saw a new commitment. I
do think one fly in the ointment here, and I mentioned it earlier, is antitrust. And I think you're going to have you're going to be treading on dangerous ground if you start throwing people out and you start saying, I know you've been with us since 1932, but now in this new era, you're not going to be with us. I think that, because then what if I were Mississippi or Mississippi State? Vanderbilt, I would say that's fine. You can throw us out. I'm going to start antitrust suits, and I want the IRS to look at everybody's books. And that, I think, is the threat that would hold the leagues be like, fine. But, I've also said all along, and this was, whatever, it was an aside 10 years ago, Alabama is going to wake up one day and say, why are we sharing our money with Mississippi State?
Right.
Because that's how Alabama views the SEC. That's all their money. Oddly enough, I've actually seen the antitrust, the $3 settlement with the USFL. I've actually seen the check.
It used to be Earhart had it.
He still has it. He still has it in his desk. But I think that the whole tax implication thing and the whole, are they employees? Are they independent? I want to get into this summer because this is so fascinating to me. But it's a topic for the summer about how does that part shake out? How do we treat players if we are paying a basketball player $7 million in NIL money to play at BYU. How at some point Uncle Sam is going to look at this and go, well, wait a minute. That 18-year-old kid got $7 million. 35% of that is mine.
Oh, 100%. Look, there's two things that the government does well: collect taxes and make sure that they don't give a damn about fair. They just want to make sure that they get their cut and that everybody on the top end gets their share. I'm telling you, that's the two things they want to make sure of.
And that, that is to me one of the two or three, and I'm going to get into detail. Like I said, I want to do that this summer when I've got a lot of time, but that's the big, kind of detail to me is the legalities of all this. And,
right.
Frankly, the comparison between college athletes and WWE wrestlers, right? Like there's a huge comparison there because wrestlers are treated as independent contractors, yet they are told when they show up, where they show up, and how they show up. So there's so much of the business side of this that I think, we're going to try to have some people on this summer too that are much smarter than me and you put together. Although that's a pretty low bar, I think sometimes.
Yeah, it's not.
That's not a bar to clear. But so we will actually be back next Thursday because if we waited till Tuesday, it would be.
And this is going to be fun because we will not give ourselves a whole lot of time. And so if things go the wrong way, hot damn.
I wanted to do it Wednesday, but then I was like, no, we should.
We need at least 24 hours to fully digest.
Yep. So we're going to be back next Thursday, the 19th, with our final show of it'll be our final football show. We're going to bring the Why Do I Coach back, and we're going to have some more. I'm going to get, like I said, I want to get more into the business weeds of all this and maybe some other schools as well. Maybe some of those Tier A schools, maybe we can get some input from them and what they think, how this shakes out. I'm just really curious. I think this is going to be a transformational summer for college athletics. And I'm, buddy, if it is chaos, I am here.
You like to watch the world burn.
Oh, as deeply and as longly as I can. I don't want like a big explosion. I want like a slow burn.
You want a tire fire. It burns a long time.
I want this to be like a wildfire. I just want it to grow and grow, because frankly, the whole thing needs to be blown up anyway. If we're being serious, it's broken, and yeah, we did pick a hell of a time to do a stadium rebuild, but that's neither here nor there. I still say this is my one off-season bold prediction, and people say, well, it's not possible. I think Hunter Yurchek and the Arkansas AD are going to walk into the Liberty Bowl, and they're going to see that, and they're going to go, we are not playing here in 2025. That game will be moved to Little Rock, or at least attempted to be moved to Little Rock.
They're going to try to move it.
By the end of the fourth quarter, I think calls will be made because I don't think and people are, oh, they can't do it. Okay. We'll see, but I just
I'll
don't.
Be shocked if we actually play that game. That we will.
No, I think it's too late. I think we'll play it, but I don't think it'll be at Memphis. But we'll do that.
Have you been to War Memorial? What a dump! I'm talking about a dump.
So I think next week we will do that as part 2 of our season wrap up. We'll do, and Brian, if you're still with us, we'll do 3 bold predictions for 2025. And I've already given my first one away.
And you know what
y'all can have that one for free.
The dumpiest stadiums we've ever been to. Anyway.
So Larry just pissed off the Arkansas fan base, but that's okay.
No, their stadium in Fayetteville is super nice. But the stadium in Little Rock is a dump. I'm talking about a dump. Anyway, it was a dump when I went to see Billy Joel and Elton John, and hell, that was in the 90s.
Well, the U of M played over there in 93. Was it 93 or 94? It was 94, I think. It was one of those 2 years. Second sickest I've ever been. I had the flu and had to go march, and it poured rain the entire. Well, it didn't pour. Let me back up. It was that
misty,
miserable,
drizzly,
slightly above a drizzle, but not quite pouring down rain. Oh, I was so sick. I think I was running like 102-degree temperature on the bus. I slept the whole way there and back. It was just miserable. But enough of my band miseries. So we will be back again. We'll be back next Thursday with a season wrap. We'll have bold predictions. Brian Moss, hope you get feeling better soon. And for the best co-host in all the land, Larry Marley, it's John Maddox signing off, saying we will talk to everybody next week.